What is up, everybody? We are back with another weekly WNBA update after a week of close matchups. So today we are going to talk the Indiana Fever. Look, it started with Caitlin Clark's injury and then dominoes just continued to fall. So is now the right time to reevaluate what the Indiana Fever's expectations this season truly are. Plus, don't look now, but the Vegas Aces are humming. All of that, plus so much more on today's show. But before we tip off the first quarter of today's show, we start how we always do with the fast five stories that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. So we'll start with number one. The Golden State Valkyries have announced their mascot, and yes, she's perfect. Violet. She's a raven, and ravens are known as helpful and savvy counterparts of Valkyrie's mythology. So kudos to them for sticking with that theme there. She made her debut at the Valkyries game against the Sun this past week. She's fluffy, she's purple, she has glasses, she is perfect. And Cass, I think that the Golden State Valkyries should be the example across the WNBA of how you do marketing, especially for several of these new expansion teams joining the W. We have Toronto, we have Portland, we have Cleveland, we have Detroit, we have Philadelphia. All of them could take a masterclass from the Golden State Valkyries in building a brand and sticking to it. More on that here in just a bit. We'll go ahead to number two. Sophie Cunningham went down with a knee injury against the Connecticut Sun this past Sunday. Now, the Fever keep taking hit after hit after hit. It started with Caitlin Clark. She has been out for more than half of this season with a groin injury. And then Sydney Colson and Aari McDonald are both out for the season with their own respective injuries. Now, Kelsey Mitchell played her freaking butt off in the Fever's 99-93 victory over Connecticut on Sunday. She had 38 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals. But the good vibes kind of ended there. Indiana's lost 4 of their last 6. Now Sophie Cunningham is dealing with an injury, and the injuries only continue to pile up. Can they overcome it? Or do we need to shift our perspective on this Fever team? More on that also here in just a bit. But let's move on to number 3. The New York Liberty have slipped out of the number 2 spot in the WNBA standings after being there for nearly the entirety of the season behind the Minnesota Lynx. The Liberty lost against the Aces, which moved the Dream to the number 2 spot. And the Liberty have recently dropped 3 of their matchups against the Lynx. Now, they have an opportunity on Tuesday night to avoid getting swept by the Lynx. But if they do in fact get swept by the Lynx, if they do continue to get leapfrogged in the standings, what does that mean for this Liberty squad that had championship expectations going into this season? Number 4, Alyssa Thomas marks her 5th triple-double of the season in the Mercury's victory over the Seattle Storm this past Sunday. Her five triple-doubles matches the total for all other WNBA players this season, and it's insane. And I think it's very safe to say that Alyssa Thomas has settled in very well in her new home with the Phoenix Mercury and also have held in their own playoff spot in their own right. Do we need to start talking about Alyssa Thomas a little bit more and a little bit more seriously in the MVP conversation? We'll get into some of our awards, picks, and predictions later on in the show, but we'll round out our Fast Five with our 5th and final point. Stephanie White, head coach of the Indiana Fever, said that the hope is that Caitlin Clark will return before the end of the regular season. Now, Caitlin Clark has dealt with several injuries this season. She had the quad issue. She's been dealing with some muscle wear and tear. She's had very vague and undetermined timeframes of what her return might be. The Fever have strategically been very vague and unclear about what her timeline could be or exactly what could be causing a setback for her potential return. There was speculation that the Fever could just bench her until the playoffs or even bench her until next season. But with all of these injuries that have been plaguing this Fever team, like I mentioned, Sydney Colson, Aari McDonald, now Sophie Cunningham, are they going to rush Caitlin Clark back? Personally, I don't think that's a very smart idea, but anytime we can see Caitlin Clark on the court, it's going to be a good day. So more on that and how the Fever proceed throughout the rest of the season with Caitlin Clark and the rest of their injured stars here in just a little bit. That was this week's Fast Five, everything that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. Let's get into our main conversation. It's game time. It's the first quarter. We start with what had the potential to be a banner year for the Indiana Fever. We go back to this past offseason. It was very clear and very obvious with the moves that the Fever made in the offseason that they were pushing all of their chips into the middle for a championship. That they looked at their young stars in Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark. They acknowledged that they didn't have that veteran championship presence. They went out, added Sydney Colson and Sophie Cunningham and DeWanna Bonner. Now, DeWanna Bonner no longer in Indiana, but it was still a very clear and obvious and strategic move that the Fever was making this past season of identifying roster deficiencies or maybe holes in the roster and plugging those holes in the roster. But now, injury after injury after injury. Sophie Cunningham is the recent one. She suffered a knee injury. Ari McDonald, Sydney Colson, Caitlin Clark's availability is up in the air. Cass, are we getting to the point where we need to really reevaluate how we view this Indiana Fever team?
I can't think of another team that has their hopes have fallen apart this quickly and seemingly out of their control. The one thing about winning a championship that we don't talk enough about, I think, in regularity is there has to be a bit of luck involved. No champion in anything has ever won without a little bit of luck, injury luck, luck in the schedule, like whatever. The Fever don't have any luck, it feels like, this year. And that's not under their control. Like how emotional Stephanie White was after that game, I felt that. Like you feel for this team, I feel like, whether you're an Indiana fan or not, because like this could be your team. You know, it's not like a team that doesn't have title aspirations or like realistic title aspirations having all these injuries. You know, that's one thing. But like the Fever could have competed. And for a team that runs around the point guard position, that is built around Caitlin Clark and her talents, to not have her, but then to go without your next two point guards, like it's just brutal. Like it's just brutal and you feel for them.
It's hard not to, right? Like you don't have to be a Fever fan or a Fever diehard to look at what they've been dealing with this season and just feel bad. Because it's nothing that anybody did wrong. It's not a misstep. It wasn't a bad evaluation. It wasn't a bad decision. It's just injuries happen and are an unfortunate part of sports. And sometimes they disproportionately affect some teams more than others. And that's what the Fever are dealing with now. And that's almost the frustrating thing is in sports, you want so badly to just blame someone for falling short of expectations, but there's no one to blame in this situation. And Stephanie White said they've got something inside of them that you just can't teach. And I think that has been proven by the way that they've been able to continue to respond to adversity. That even when Caitlin Clark was out, they were still able to win the Commissioner's Cup. Like they've continued to just answer every time they get smacked in the mouth. But at some point, there's just no more answers that you have. I think we might be there with the Fever.
So long ago.
Yeah, sorry, Cass, go ahead.
No, you're like that Commissioner's Cup feels so long ago. I do agree. I feel like we're there with the Fever. Like there is always a line in your life between an excuse and a reason, I think. I think this has become a reason. Like the Indiana Fever falling to 6th in the standings, potentially really like could fall out of the playoffs with as much movement as we've seen. Like Seattle is now sitting in 8th on the brink of a playoff spot. They were in 2nd or 3rd like 2 weeks ago. You know, them, if they do miss the playoffs, like the reason is just consistent, constant injuries, because it's not just to Caitlin Clark. Like you said, they were doing better. They were finding ways to win without Caitlin Clark. But now you wipe out all of their point guards. You take away Sophie Cunningham. You know, you have these little injuries elsewhere. It is just so hard to overcome that in a condensed season where also you don't have a lot of time to practice and get a player like Odyssey Sims up to full speed and working like she's been there since the training camp.
And I think in a weird way, this can make all of us feel even more optimistic about the Indiana Fever next year. Next year. Because if we see how they've been able to stick together and still find ways to win games, even when their roster just gets, riddled down, it feels like every single week, then that gives me optimism that if and when knock on wood, they are all, fingers crossed, they are at full strength next year, then great. They're that much more poised and ready to go on a championship run because they've battled that adversity. There's not a single championship team in all of sports that hasn't been able to win a championship without a whole heck of a lot of adversity, whether it was that season or the years before. But now, Cass, I mean, that gives me excitement about the team next year. But now, this team this year, this 2025 version of the Indiana Fever, I don't think it's crazy to say that they could potentially miss out on the playoffs altogether.
Yeah, they could miss out on the playoffs. And I think it puts into even more context things like the Aces winning championships back to back, right? Or the Lynx and the Liberty playing in the finals last year and then continuing to win this year. Like, championship windows are so fragile and so small. Like, the thing about the Fever, if you do look ahead, is I think there's only 2 or 3 players technically under contract for next year because of how much the league is going to change. Like, Indiana went all in because it made sense to go all in now when they had these players under contract and could bring them in. We don't know what next year is going to look like for anyone. And I think it's just another, like I said, great example of championship windows are so fragile. And if you're a sports fan, you appreciate them when they come around and when they are successful.
I think there have been so many dynasties in sports that have given us this mirage that winning championships is easy. Like, Tom Brady can do it 7 times. So can everybody else. And it's like, no. Just because Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes have had their dynasties and the Golden State Warriors had their dynasty and Alabama football had their dynasty. No. They are more the exception than it is the rule. We can apply that logic here too. And, looking at other sports the same way, that whenever you are in a championship window and you fall short of that a lot of times there is somebody that has to answer to that. Somebody gets fired, that, there's something that you have to basically justify to the rest of the world, to the fan base, to the league, that we set these expectations, we fell short of them, and somebody has to pay for that. This Indiana Fever team, it's okay. If the Fever don't make the playoffs, it's okay. And that's crazy, because if I would have said that months ago, that would have sounded insane, because falling short of the playoffs would have been a massive disappointment for this team. But now, look, injuries happen. It stinks, and you want to have some sort of justification for it, but there's no justification for it other than, man, that's so incredibly unfortunate. All right, let's move on to our second quarter. Don't look now, but the Aces are climbing up the ranks after months of us saying, what's wrong with Vegas? After months of Becky Hammon calling out her team and saying they're not giving enough effort in post-game press conferences. Well, now they are on a 7-game win streak, including their win on Sunday against the Wings. A'ja Wilson had 34 points. The Aces had 18 three-pointers. They put up 106 points over Dallas. They're now 21-14. They're 5th in the standings. They've won 9 out of their last 10 games on a massive hot streak. A'ja Wilson is inevitable. I mean, we thought that we couldn't go this long without talking about A'ja Wilson. I mean, she's put up 25 plus in 6 of her last 7 games, including 30 plus in 3 of her last 4. Cass, how in the world has this Vegas team figured things out in such a massive way like this?
First and foremost, they lost by 53 points to Minnesota.
Which it was not that long ago.
It was not that long ago. It was, I think, like 10, 11, 12 games ago, maybe 8. I don't know. But certainly players are not happy when that happens. And when you have players on this team who have won back-to-back championships and won gold medals together at the Olympics, like, you're going to find a way to come out of that better, which they did immediately. But I also think moving Jewell Loyd to the bench, which came at her request, Becky said, and something that Becky Hammon had kind of put off, moving Jewell to the bench has been huge for them. She can lead the second group. She can come in, provide kind of a different dynamic. It's just a little bit of a change, and they've certainly taken off. Kirsten Bell is in that starting lineup. They added Alyssa Smith a little while ago. I think the second big thing is just time. We've thought of the Aces the same way for the past 3, 4, even 5 years. They've mostly been the same. They've had the same core. They've had success before they won the championship with Becky Hammon, and now they're just completely different. And to their credit, players have said this all season, it's going to take time to implement these new pieces and to make these little changes that will go a long way into being a contender again.
There are certain graces that I feel like we don't give the best teams in sports. That if you're a team that won back-to-back championships, we just feel like, oh, it doesn't matter if you have all of these new pieces, that you should just be able to figure it out. Whereas if it was any other team in the league, then we would maybe add more context and nuance, and we would see why maybe there was an early season slump because they weren't able to figure things out right away. Maybe we should have seen this coming. Now that we're in a position where the Aces are playing like a contender, hindsight's 2020, we can look back and say, well, yeah, maybe we should have expected some zigs and some zags and some peaks and some valleys. This Aces team, though, I think is continuing to prove why we shouldn't have ever counted them out in the first place at the beginning of the season, as easy as it may have been. Are they a contender right now?
Yeah, absolutely contender. I was chatting with some people like prior to All-Star, and there were some of us who were like, oh, the Aces are kind of dead in the water a little bit here, struggling, can't figure it out. Other teams have surpassed them. And there were some other people who were saying, I mean, this is the same group. Like, they'll figure it out. They've clearly figured it out. There is chemistry on the team with some of their stars. A'ja Wilson is still one of the best players in the world, and they're rising. I mean, playoffs always depend on who you match up with. And they could have an advantageous matchup depending on how the next, however many weeks play out. Like, we've seen so much movement that I'm not even going to speculate who they would play in the first round. But you can't count out experience like that between Becky Hammon and A'ja Wilson and Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray. You just can't ignore that.
And their schedule coming up. Yes, they have Atlanta on Tuesday night. We're recording this podcast on Tuesday, and they have Phoenix on Thursday. They get both of those games at home before they have a road stretch. They have one in Washington. They get 3 matchups with Chicago. 2 of those are at home before the end of the season. Like, those matchups with Chicago are absolutely winnable. You have several games in here against other contenders, whether it's Phoenix or Atlanta or that one game against Minnesota, but you split a few of those and you can absolutely see a path for Vegas to be a top 4 seed, possibly even, depending on how some of these head-to-head matchups and the top 4, top 5 in the standings go. So it is crazy. And to your point, it's so hard to project when we're so far out because there has been so much movement and so much shifting in the standings. But if they continue to play like this, who's to say no? And that just kind of shows the value of veteran leadership. That's exactly what's happening with the Las Vegas Aces. But before we continue to our third quarter, let's hit some halftime. We had some happy news in the WNBA and women's basketball this past week. Sue Bird, the living legend, became the first player in WNBA history to be honored with a statue. There was a statue put up outside of the team's home arena at Climate Pledge Arena. It's 8 feet, 650 pounds, obviously not to size. It depicts her at 44 scoring a layup, which she said was how she scored both her first and last points in the WNBA. I love this. It feels crazy that this is the first statue for a WNBA player when you look back at history at some of the absolute legends of the game. But I will ask you, Cass, who's the next player in the WNBA to have a statue erected?
The obvious answer is Diana Taurasi, who just retired. But to the point you just made in terms of the legends of the game, I hope that franchises, especially with all of this new influx of money and cash and support, I hope they do look back at these legends and honor them in that similar way. That said, I don't want too much saturation of this, but certainly there are incredible legends that these franchises have who should be out in front of these arenas.
I'm a statue gatekeeper. Like, if like it should mean something, right? It's a big deal. Yeah. Like, if you are going to be, enshrined forever in front of your arena, it should be for very good reason. Now, Sue Bird, very, very much so, deserves to have her own statue. Diana Taurasi, I would agree. I've seen maybe some other statues in sports and in other leagues where we probably could have done without that one. But Candace Parker?
Just as perspective on these two, like, played for 20 years, came into the league in 2002 and 2004. So that's fourth, fifth, sixth year, stayed with their franchises the entire time. Like, that is, I think, a level of legendary that deserves it. And that's what should be looked at when franchises are going back and parsing this out.
The longevity is so
Crazy.
impressive. I mean, that's what made Tiger Woods so great, Tom Brady so great,
Yep.
and obviously the accolades and the points and the championships that Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi have both achieved. Truly, just the longevity is so impressive in a league that didn't have when they were, in their active playing days and in the primes of their careers, did not have the same luxuries that maybe WNBA teams have. Now, I'm not saying that they have enough luxuries now. That is still to come, but at least more now than maybe in the early 2000s whenever Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi were in the primes of their careers. But congratulations to Sue Bird. Very, very, very well deserved. I've never been to Seattle, but when I do make my trek over there, I'm going to have
Seattle's very nice.
I've heard it's lovely. Okay, let's go to our third quarter. The New York Liberty. They've been that second team in the W for really a majority of this season. It has been the Lynx and the Liberty all season long, which has been such a fun kind of topic of conversation of the two teams that were represented in the WNBA finals this past year. Widely viewed as the two best teams in the W. It kind of for a long time felt like it was the Lynx and the Liberty and it was everybody else. But the Liberty are on a cool streak. They have slipped out of the top two. The Atlanta Dream have leapfrogged the Liberty in the WNBA standings. The Liberty have lost 3 against the Lynx. They have an opportunity tonight on Tuesday to avoid the sweepcast. But is it panic time in New York?
I don't think it's panic time, but it's certainly concern time. I mean, that third matchup on Sunday with the Lynx, the Liberty had it at least close to being in the bag. They were like putting it in the bag at the time, and they missed a few easy layups to end it. Natasha Cloud had an opportunity at the end, looked like she was kind of awaiting the contact versus just finishing the play. I don't think there's panic because it is the Lynx, and I think there are reasons why, right? Like, I know everyone's tired of the schedule, Cheryl Reeve included, doesn't want to talk about it anymore, but that's a brutal schedule. And on the flip side, like, Minnesota is going to go into a stretch where they play 4 games in 6 days. I think they had 1 game last week, and it was against the Liberty. Like, those things do play into it. The front court is taken out. I just think fans need to put it into perspective a little bit. That said, there are things to clean up.
When I said the Fever, like, even if they miss the playoffs, it's okay. Your expectations in May are different than they are in August because circumstances have changed. And you're allowed to change your expectations when circumstances change like that. I don't view the Liberty in that same kind of way. That I understand Jonquel Jones was out for an extended period of time, that then you lose Brianna Stewart, but you also get Emma Meesman. And you're also, a team that very much so had the ability to hold on to that second spot. You're also a team that had opportunities to beat the Lynx at least twice, if not in all 3 matchups so far, and they just didn't. So look, it's not the same thing as the Fever that they're not going to make the playoffs. Of course, the Liberty are going to make the playoffs. But it was, I don't want to say championship or bust, but it was championship or we're going to be really upset. And now we're talking about a Liberty team and we're talking about how difficult the schedule is. Like, it's of course, it's unequal and their schedule is a grind. It's difficult 100%. But this team just has bigger expectations than that. And I don't blame them for being sick and tired of talking about the schedule and so on and so forth. Like, this was a team with higher expectations.
I think in terms of the Emma comment, like adding Emma, that game against Minnesota really showcased how she came in at a time where there's so much in flux. And she also hasn't had a lot of practices with New York. Like, these are just realities. And I think you could, in some ways, say the same thing about Dejanay Carrington. These 2 great additions didn't have the best games at the time in that series. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's fair. Like, exactly like we said earlier, that you can't just expect, like with the aces, you can't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden just build chemistry. Like, it doesn't work like that. I just think that the Liberty are now kind of at a fork in the road, that it could go down a much more slippery slope if they go one direction with the schedule that they have upcoming, or it can be kind of the kick in the butt maybe that they needed. That they needed to kind of slip in the standings, and they needed to kind of maybe get humbled a little bit by the Minnesota Lynx. And we'll see how this game plays out. Again, we're recording this podcast on Tuesday at 1:30 p.m., so before that fourth and final matchup between the Lynx and the Liberty. But I hope that this becomes the kick in the butt that the Liberty needed, because sometimes you need it. Right? Sometimes you can feel really comfortable at the top and then you go from there. But let's wrap up today's show with our fourth and final quarter. Awards watch. It's my favorite time of year. It's the best season. Awards. Cass, who would be your pick right now, Tuesday, August 19th? Who's your MVP?
I mean, it's between Nafisa Collier, I think, and Alyssa Thomas for me. Nafisa Collier has certainly been the leader. I think in the past couple of years, it's been a case of you maybe deserved it the year prior or had a season that was worthy of it the year prior. So you come into the season as the favorite and you still perform really well, and then you get voted the favorite. What Alyssa Thomas is doing, though, is the same she's done throughout her entire career. I mean, averaging nearly a triple-double in a new place, lifting the mercury. But when it comes back to Fee, I think what's going to be interesting is how voters decide her absence. There is no MVP who has missed more than, I think it's like 15% of the season. That was Jonquil Jones, who missed 5 games back in 2021. So there are people who are going to maybe change their vote based on that, or put that into context. And then also when you're talking about Fee, there's often a conversation around the best player on the best team. That would certainly be her if you're looking at it that way versus anyone else. I know Asia Wilson has kind of put herself in this conversation, Kelsey Mitchell as well. But then there's kind of a third aspect of Minnesota is winning and beating New York, still reigning champions, very good team, without Fee. So are people going to take votes away from Fee? Or as a voter, are you going to change your vote because you're looking at it as, well, they're still like playing pretty darn well. Maybe I should give it to someone else. So I think down the stretch of the season, MVP has become an incredibly interesting talking point, as I think it should every year. I don't think that unanimous MVP should be, a thing we talk about every year. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, there's no way that there's a unanimous MVP every single year. And when we have a year that someone is so great that they are the unanimous MVP, then wonderful, and we can celebrate that. If I had to pick right now, my pick would also be Nafisa Collier, but I think you bring up a very, very important point about the philosophy of how you view MVP. A lot of times it's best player on the best team, and sometimes the best player on the best team is the most valuable player in any sort of league. That would be Fee. But I also view MVP as, if you take this player away from their respective team, that respective team is totally and completely different. That they are more valuable to their team than any other player in the rest of that respective league. Now, about a month ago, I would have said that was Fee, right? That if you take Nafisa Collier away from this Lynx team, and that's no disrespect to the rest of this Lynx roster, but it's a much, much different story without Fee than it is with. Well, now we've gotten a pretty solid sample size of what the Lynx look like without Nafisa Collier. But I think Alyssa Thomas, just doing what she's doing, period, regardless of what anyone else is doing or any other injuries in the league, Alyssa Thomas should have been in the conversation. But I think she's now cementing herself more and more and more in the conversation. If you are of the philosophy that the Minnesota Lynx are still a contender with or without Nafisa Collier, as great and wonderful as Nafisa Collier is. Today, I'm still going Fee, but I'm not putting my vote in today. I'm not writing it in Sharpie. I'm writing it in pencil. Okay, let's move on to Rookie of the Year. And it felt like during the WNBA draft, maybe there was an obvious answer here, but the WNBA has just been giving us so many wonderful little rookie presents. Cass, who would be your contenders for Rookie of the Year at this point?
These rookies are really good. I think it's an incredibly exciting Rookie of the Year race because Paige Beckers is certainly the one you mentioned, number one overall pick, has asserted herself in the WNBA very well. Her game translates very well. Sonia Citron, though, is right up there for me. I'm kind of going back and forth. I mean, scoring a few less points, but like efficiency is very good. Rebounding is right up there. Like, I think they're very much neck and neck. For me, though, what Sony has done is really stepped up since Brittany Sykes was traded to the Seattle Storm. And that has been really impressive. I mean, both of these players are players who feel like they've been in the WNBA for a really, really long time. Like, just almost like veteran leadership. So I will be interested to see, what sways my decision down the final stretch.
I'll go with, a teammate of Sonia Citron. I mean, this Washington team has just been gifted a riches of rookies. I'll go Kiki Area-Finn. I mean, Sonia Citron has been incredibly consistent, but Kiki putting up 13 points a game. She leads the Mystics in rebounds with 8.5 per game. I mean, Kiki has also been so incredibly consistent. And, if you ask me this question, who would be my pick today? Of course, things are always subject to change. I would pick Kiki. And I ask myself, am I doing that just to be different? Like, am I doing that just to not pick Paige Beckers? And nothing against Paige. She is wonderful and she's a blast to watch. But am I saying that just to have a different take than everybody else? But if you just compare the stats, and the stats aren't everything, I don't want to be, just a box score scout because there's so many more elements beyond just the box score. But yes, I mean, Paige is putting up 19 points a game. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous and should come to no surprise to anybody who watched her at UConn. But, I mean, Kiki, like, yes, she's scoring fewer points, but she's putting up significantly more rebounds. And she's, like, her defense, I think, is kind of been her calling card rather than her scoring ability. And her scoring ability has still been incredibly impressive. So I don't think it's crazy to make the comparison, not just between Kiki and Paige, but Kiki, Paige, and Sonia. All three have such a strong argument to potentially be Rookie of the Year. Paige Beckers has more of the name recognition. I just forgot how to speak English for a second. She has the bigger name. She's the bigger celebrity. She has been the bigger star and has been since going back to college. But I want to give these Mystics rookies their day and their recognition because they absolutely deserve it.
I want to throw out one more interesting stat as I was kind of going down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Through Monday, Sonia Citron is 13th in win shares overall. Paige is 22nd. I just thought that was an interesting number you might not have thought of at the beginning of the year. Although, to be fair to Paige, number one picks go to teams that are not typically very good.
Right. That's interesting because we just talked about kind of MVP philosophy. There can be several different schools of thought about how you view an MVP. Rookie of the Year is different. Is it a rookie on the best team, statistics, scoring, defense? What would be your personal philosophy of what a Rookie of the Year campaign and resume looks like?
I think it's just all of it for me. Like, are you producing, but is that production, just because you're the number one option on a team that isn't doing well? Or is it, in Sony's case, she's a part of a system that has exceeded expectations in really big ways? I'm a big efficiency person. I typically kind of shy away, like all WNBA time, I shy away from players who are maybe scoring 20 points but shooting 30%. Don't love it. I do think, though, this is a great time to bring in Dominique Malonga, who is the number 2 overall pick to Seattle. Definitely not in the Rookie of the Year conversation, but this is a pick who we knew at the time, first of all, like, voted by GMs to be the best player of the rookie class in 5 years. So this is more of an investment opportunity. She was never going to get a ton of minutes with Seattle, which is the other big thing. You have to be in a situation as a rookie to play a bunch of minutes. Seattle has an older roster, postseason hopes. They landed up in that number 2 spot, but we're in a good position. And so Rookie of the Year is also, can you stay on the floor and be on the floor significantly?
It's all fair points to bring up. And I think another thing that we should bring up in Paige Becker's Rookie of the Year conversation is she hasn't been consistently out there on the court, and she has been dealing with injury. So if we're going to bring that up as a reason for skepticism for Nafisa Collier, I think that it's only fair to bring that up for Paige Beckers as well. And as far as Defensive Player of the Year is concerned, Cass, am I oversimplifying it by saying Defensive Player of the Year is the league leader in rebounds and blocks? Because that's exactly what A'ja Wilson is. And that's exactly who I would pick today as Defensive Player of the Year.
Are you only picking her, though, because she leads in rebounds and blocks?
Not only because she leads in rebounds and blocks, but it's a pretty good argument.
I am not big on just Defensive Player of the Year is so hard, first of all. Because I don't think, and I think when you talk to coaches and other players as well, like stats don't tell the entire story. Certainly, and this is not about A'ja or anyone else on my list, but certainly you're getting a lot of blocks in some cases because your, backcourt defenders have let their player go by. Not all the time, obviously, but like that's part of it. I think Defensive Player of the Year, much like MVP, is a very forward heavy award because when it comes to a guard, like you're probably only getting steal numbers, if that. Defense is just so hard, and you really have to dig into defensive numbers. A'ja Wilson's on my list. Alyssa Thomas is on my list. Nafisa Collier is on my list, although I think Alana Smith could take a lot of votes from her. She also, I think, is tied with A'ja Wilson in blocks or like right underneath her. And then Gabby Williams is on my list. But the thing about Gabby, who plays for Seattle, is the Storm have absolutely plummeted both in the standings and in defensive rating. And as much as we talk about these awards are individual, they are very much team. Like your team has to have success and your teammates have to be in the right positions for you to have success. And I think that might ding Gabby's candidacy here a little bit.
Defense isn't sexy. It doesn't pop off the page. Like you don't tune in to a game because, oh my gosh, look how great of a defensive battle this is. Like there's so much nuance to it. And I think you bring up all very, very good points. And that brings me to Most Improved Player. I think is also incredibly nuanced, can be incredibly subjective. About how do you view improvement? Like your role on a team? Like did you score more points? Like help me, Cass.
I can't help you because every single year, this is my thing. I hate this award. Like I get it. It's just so difficult to parse through. And I know that people involved with this award are like, that's the best part. You can have discussion. But I feel like there's always like 20 players who 2 weeks left in the season, like could still win this award.
It's the same thing as like comeback player of the year in the NFL. And it's like, well, what do they come back from? Like, do they just come back from being bad? Did they come back from injury? Same thing with Most Improved Player. Well, are they improved because they're on a better team? Yes, are they improved because they doubled up their average point total? Are they improved because now they're playing a larger role? Again, yes, that's what makes this fun, but does it make it fair? I don't know. I don't think so.
Just think about this. Like, I think this is the most interesting part about Most Improved Player. Last year, Sabrina Ionescu was in a lot of conversations because she had really improved in the mid-range. And that was huge for the Liberty, for her to be able to get that floater off instead of just driving or just hitting threes. This year, we're also talking about Alicia Gray being in the Most Improved conversation because of increased production, career year, yada, yada, yada. These are like all WNBA level players that we are talking about in the same conversation as, for example, Atlanta Dream's Naz Hillman, who has become an incredibly good three-point shooter in that Smesco ball system. It's just such diametrically opposed situations. And I think it's hard to, like you said, like, I don't know that it's like fair. Not that life isn't fair. Like, get over it.
Right. But like still I want it to be. And it's just not. And like it does feel icky to talk about Sabrina Ionescu, an elite WNBA player, as Most Improved, which feels like kind of like a little blue ribbon that you get at the fair. Like, no, like this is just I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I'm getting all riled up. Coach of the Year. You will be hard pressed to get me off of my soapbox where I am screaming at the top of my lungs for Stephanie White to be Coach of the Year. All of the stuff that the Fever have gone through, the injuries, and I'll throw DeWanna Bonner in there, that we still don't know exactly what went on behind closed doors with DeWanna Bonner and the Fever organization. That was a very strange exit, and they were still able to overcome that when they brought DeWanna Bonner in for a very specific reason, and to have her veteran leadership on that team, a team that's lacking veteran leadership. One of the best, if not the best players in the sport, Caitlin Clark, has been out for over half the season. They've been riddled with injury. And they're still, like, we are still talking about the Fever potentially getting into the playoffs. I have been so impressed with how Stephanie White has been able to keep this team together. Whereas I feel like coach of the year, similar to MVP, is coach of the best team. Like, that's great. And like, sometimes coaches that are the coach of the best team deserve to be coach of the year. I think that this is a different instance, though, where we need to acknowledge what coaches actually do and what their job is, and that is to continue to win games no matter what happens. That's exactly what the Fever have been doing.
Well, for all of those reasons, I would put members of the Fever front office in consideration for Executive of the Year, because I think how they have traversed in-season problems, specifically bringing in Ari McDonald, is very impressive. I agree with you on Coach of the Year, another kind of split in philosophy. So I have two for you. The first, to your point about a coach who has a team that maybe isn't at the top of the rankings, but has done an incredible job, Natalie Nakase of the Golden State Valkyries.
Totally.
She took this job literally with a blank slate, and that can be a positive. But there's also an unknown of who can you get, who can we bring in an expansion draft? Will all of these players come together? You have the pressure of your owner saying, we're going to win a championship within 5 years, so you better get off the ground running. What she's been able to do with this team, specifically on the defensive end, as a first-time head coach with an expansion team, the first expansion team since 2008, is truly impressive. And I do think she'd probably get my vote right now. But also, you have Carl Smesko, who similarly, the Atlanta Dreamers sitting in second right now. This is a guy who was in the college ranks for so many years, right? Like, there has to be a reason to jump to the WNBA. He takes a good team. His front office dips into free agency, gets players who will play his three-point system, and he has them really as title contenders at this point. Just two different coaching situations, but two very, very impressive ones.
I love that this year we have different kind of perspectives of coaches, that it's not just, best coach, best team, which again is totally fair and totally justified. But you look at the Valkyries, I mean, we were lovingly poking a little bit of fun at how lackluster, I think is a nice word to say, their roster looked at the beginning of the season. And we were, kind of joking around like, just get through year one and hope for the best in year two. And now they're just barely sitting outside of a playoff position. And even if the Valkyries don't make the playoffs, still what they were able to do to be an interesting and intriguing and winning basketball team this year, I think is incredibly impressive. Of course, those are just our feelings now. There's plenty of basketball left to be played. We reserve every single right to change any of our thoughts on what we have, what might end up being the once award season rolls around, but just kind of a little bit of a vibe check of where we are right now in the WNBA season. We've got several great matchups coming up over the next week before we catch up with you again next week. Starting with Tuesday night, Minnesota at New York, 7 p.m. Eastern time, the fourth and final meeting of two of the biggest powers in this league and a little WNBA Finals rematch for the fourth and final time. Will Minnesota get the sweep, Cass? I'm going to call it early.
No, I'll give the Liberty one.
I think that's fair. I'm going to say, just for the sake of argument, Minnesota gets the sweep, and then, maybe we might see some absolute pandemonium in New York. But that game tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. We also have a matchup on Thursday, Minnesota at Atlanta. Now, the top two teams in the league, as Atlanta has taken over that number 2 spot in the standings. Later that night, 10 o'clock Eastern time, Phoenix and Vegas. We've talked a lot about how there's been a lot of jockeying at near the top half of the WNBA standings, Phoenix and Vegas are two of those teams that have been kind of falling and rising and rising and falling at a huge opportunity cost for the Aces to get a massive win against Phoenix at home.
Yeah, I mean, they want to keep climbing. I don't know if it's really a rivalry, but certainly regionally, those two are very, very close.
Yeah, totally. And then a game that I think is very intriguing and may tell us a lot about what the Fever have left in the tank. Minnesota go to Indiana on Friday, 7:30 Eastern time. This will be the Fever's first game since Sophie Cunningham's injury. Is this a fair test for what this Fever team can accomplish until the end of the season?
Fortunately for them, they've actually had some time off. So that might help. I think anyone measuring themselves up against the Minnesota Lynx right now, unless you're, the Dream, the Liberty, maybe Mercury, like it's just really, really hard. Minnesota is running away with this league, at least in the regular season.
Yeah. It's, I guess if you compare yourself to far and beyond the best team in the league, maybe it's not the best. But still a test nonetheless for a Fever team that have beaten the Minnesota Lynx in the biggest stage so far this season, the Commissioner's Cup. Very different Fever team, but Fever team nonetheless. That is going to do it for us today. She's Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. You can find Cass's wonderful work on sports.yahoo.com. She's constantly putting out wonderful articles all about the WNBA. So whether you are a new fan, an old fan, a casual fan, or a strong fan, we have everything that you might be looking for as far as the WNBA is concerned. And we will be back next week with a full WNBA breakdown. So until then, keep it right here with Yahoo Sports.